Before we are going to discuss 5 questions of environment, uh, I just want to tell you few general things about answer writing. When we are writing an answer, we have to keep these things in mind. The most important part of writing an answer is the question itself. You have to understand the question very, very clearly. What I have seen in most people is something is being asked and people are writing something else. They are not addressing the demand of the question. Here itself, we lose a lot of marks. So if you want to increase your score, first of all, understand the question very well and address its demand. Now, what does it mean? Let's see why this question. Okay. So this first question is, what is oil pollution? What are its impacts on the marine ecosystem? In what way is oil pollution particularly harmful for a country like India? First of all, identify how many questions are being asked. We can clearly see there are 3 questions and 10 marks. So we have 2 pages. In those 2 pages, we have to give adequate space to all the 3 parts of the question. Now, first part is only asking about what. What? This keyword is important. What? Now it is asking only about its kind of definition. What is it? So we will not give 1 page to this because we have to answer the rest of the 2 questions as well. We'll give only half a page to it. Now the next question is what? Again, what? This keyword is important. Somewhere it will be discussed, somewhere it will be why, somewhere it will be analyzed. Just focus on this keyword. Here it is what? What are its impacts on the marine ecosystem? We have to clearly talk about only the impact. Don't write any causes or anything because it is not being asked here. What is asked is impact. And impact, where are we asking about the impact? Marine ecosystem. Now you have to know what an ecosystem is. Agar when we start with our environment syllabus, the first thing we study about is ecosystem. Now, ecosystem talks about both living and non-living components of an environment, right? If we go back to our prelims, what we study in prelims, the definition of ecosystem talks about both living and non-living aspects. So we have to talk about both of them. Okay. Now, the next part is, in what way is oil pollution particularly harmful for a country like India? Now, in this third part, we have to answer for oil pollution and for a country like India. What does it mean like India? What is specific about India in this case? We have a very long coastline. So this kind of oil pollution or marine pollution is very important for our country to understand. So we have to answer in the context of India, not any other context, right? So first and most important aspect is understanding the question. Initially, when you are writing an answer, you will feel the rush of time. So because of this, people just very casually skip through the question and answer something else. Just forget about the time in the initial days. Focus on understanding and addressing the demand of the question and answering all the parts. This is most important. Once that is done, the second thing is the structure of the question. Now, the basic structure, I think all of you must be aware by now, is introduction, the body part, and the conclusion. Apart from that, another structuring process that I am going to talk about is within the body, how to structure. Now, what I used to do was, since there is only limited time and there are certain themes which get repeated multiple times. For example, the theme of water, the theme of pollution, the theme of wetlands in environment I'm talking about. So these kind of themes might get repeated if you analyze the PYQs. So for such kind of themes, I created a structure of my own. And I also created a structure of overall environment for myself. For example, if there is a question on environment, how I will think about is that environment has both living component and non-living component. Non-living component is what we see in our environment, right? So for example, the climatology, the atmosphere part, the soil, land, water, and everything. In the living aspect, we will talk about the humans and how we talk about humans, their economy, what is their livelihood, fishing, tourism, and so on. We can talk about vulnerable section, how it can particularly impact them. We can talk about humans' health. We can talk about the different kind of disasters which might increase due to change in an environment. Then the third thing we can talk about is biodiversity. What happens to the marine living species in this case, or in an environment in general, what happens to the species? Now there are multiple kinds of species. I'm talking here specifically about marine species. There are fishes, there are coral reefs, there are mangroves, and so on. So I'm not going to discuss with you what exactly to write in this question. What I'm trying to say is how you can generate an answer on your own. Because next time a different question will come. We can write an answer to this, but we must know how to generate an answer for any type of question that might come. Okay. So try to think in a form of a structure. Now, as soon as I see this, as soon as I see the last part, for example, the last two questions, what are the impacts and how is it harmful? So sudden, all of a sudden, that structure comes into my mind. I will talk about the biodiversity part, how it can impact the fisheries and how it can impact different corals and everything. Then I will talk about humans. So this kind of structure helps me to generate points. Now you don't have to force fit everything. You have to write according to the demand, going to the first principle back again. That we have to address the demand. You cannot write everything that you have made in a structure for yourself. Just address it and modify it according to the demand of the question. I hope this much is clear till now. Now, the third thing is, once we have certain kind of structure, once we are able to generate points, we will think about how to make those points even better. And that way we'll go to value addition aspect. Now we will try to solve this and see how to do that. Okay. So first is, what are its impacts on the marine ecosystem? Now, I'm not discussing what is oil pollution. That is simple definition part. You have to write what is it and how it happens. A very simple thing, half or half of each. Next part is, what are its impacts on the marine ecosystem? You will make a box, impacts on the marine ecosystem, and you will start writing your points. Now, for example, I start about fisheries. Now, I cannot just simply write oil pollution will lead to killing of fishes. Everyone knows that. That is not an argument. You have to write how oil pollution leads to killing of fisheries. Are you getting the difference between the two things? Now, here I'll write, due to oil pollution, a layer is created on top of the water, due to which sunlight is not able to penetrate, which leads to expulsion of zooxanthellae from the coral. So it leads to killing of coral reefs, bleaching of coral reefs. For example, this is a point. Now here is an argument कि there is a top layer created, sunlight nahi reach kar pata, that's why zooxanthellae gets expelled. Are you seeing the difference between 2 points? I have to always write an argument. I have to explain a little bit explanation, not too much because there is not a lot of space. You cannot write a paragraph here. You have to write simple points. But in each page, in each point, at least two-liner with argument. Another point of value addition is examples. Now, from where you will get examples? Newspaper, your everyday reading, some kind of example might come to your mind. You must have read some oil pollution happened in the past. You can write that. But in case you are not able to remember any example which might be possible for a new question like this, what you will do, you can simply write a very general example. For example, an oil tanker moving from one port to another might spill. That is an example in itself. It might not be very specific, but it is an example. The perfect answer, it is always important to write a better answer than others. So if you are writing this example, it makes it little better. You're not writing an ideal answer. You cannot write an ideal answer, but try to always improve. So this is one way you can add value addition. So for value addition, we learned two things. Argument is a must, and you can add examples. Now, another thing which you have to remember in answers is the presentation aspect. Now, what is presentation aspect? It does not mean you have to write very good cursive handwriting. A good enough legible handwriting is important. At the same time, try to make things visible. Whatever thing is important according to you, make it visible as much as possible. For example, if you're writing impacts on the marine ecosystem, just box that and try to take words from the question itself so that it is very clear that you are addressing the question. You are not going away from the question anywhere. If you're writing some important keyword, underline it, and so on and so forth. So these are some general principles which we discussed in this question. And I also told you how to generate points. I'm not going to give you exact points because that will be just simply spoon feeding. Just think on these lines, create your own structure. We study a lot of static things in environment, right? You can make your own structure out of that. I did the same thing. I saw that in environment syllabus, I used to read about biodiversity, I used to read about pollution, and the most important aspect about the impact on humans. So I connected all of this and used this in my environment answers. You can also do the same. Now we'll move on to the next question. Yes, this one. IPCC has predicted a global sea level rise of about 1 meter by AD 2100. So this is a context of the question. Okay. What would be its impact in India and the other countries in the Indian Ocean region? So we'll go by step one, understanding the question very clearly. We cannot go away from the question. Now this question is talking about global sea level rise of 1 meter by 2100. They have actually given us data in the question itself. Okay. And then what is the question that is being asked? That is which starts from what? First part is what would be its impact in India? This is one part of the question. So the context of the question is given. Now there are two parts to this question: impact in India and other countries in the Indian Ocean region. So these two subheadings must be clearly visible in our answer, but this is a 15 marker question. So we have 3 pages, and if you're not able to fill 3 pages in these two subheadings, we can start with the context part, which will be in our intro. Intro to dalna hi hai anyway. So what can be the introduction? Now in by this question, we'll try to understand about introduction and conclusion. Okay. So in the introduction aspect, just remember one thing, always try to do a value addition. What we usually do is we write whatever first thing comes into our mind in the introduction, and it does not add any value to the answer. It is just a waste of 3, 4 lines. Do not waste lines there. Just add some value. You can write some current event, you can write some data, anything. If you do not have any data, that is also completely okay. You cannot remember everything. Just write why here, because there is nowhere why sea level is rising asked in the question. So we can exploit it in the introduction itself. You can simply write an introduction that global sea level is rising due to thermal expansion and melting of glaciers. Because these are the two reasons, major broad two reasons of sea level rise, right? Now this can be a good introduction because I have introduced two keywords here: thermal expansion and melting of glaciers, and an argument in the introduction itself, which tells that I am well aware of sea level rise, this topic, right? Now, since again we have to fill 3 pages, and if you're not able to do that in two subheadings, after introduction, you can again make some kind of hub and spoke diagram here. Just write in the center causes of global sea level rise, and just some spokes can come out of that. First one can talk about burning of fossil fuels. Oceans absorb more than I think 90% of the global heat, which leads to thermal expansion. Then there is Arctic amplification. Antarctica is melting. From there, sea level is rising, and so on and so forth. Multiple reasons you can write, right? And it will occupy some from introduction and this hub and spoke. This will occupy some 3/4 of the page. Then you can move to these two questions. So one thing you must have understood, that I'm very conscious of my space. How I have to utilize my space of 3 pages or 2 pages. Do not waste any space, and do not try to not leave any space as well. So next, most important question from here, our question starts: impact in India. So we will make a subheading, box it, impact of global sea level rise in India. Okay. Now again, I can utilize my environment structure again here as well. Now, one impact is on humans. I can talk about humans' economy. If sea level is rising, it can impact our fisheries, it can impact our tourism. Another impact on humans is about the disasters. If sea level is rising, it is rising due to increased heat in the ocean. So this can possibly lead to more cyclones. This can possibly lead to more floods. It can lead to coastal inundation, right? Then I can talk about health of humans. So if seawater is salty water, right? If it intrudes into the land, it can percolate into the ground, and groundwater can become salty. And another aspect is agriculture related to humans. Agriculture can be impacted due to this groundwater. So can you see that's entire impact I've created from humans aspect. Then I will move to environment aspect. Environment aspect about the ecology aspect. How it can lead to coastal erosion. This is just talking about the land aspect, how it can lead to coastal erosion. Then I can move to marine biodiversity. Again, if sea level is rising, so what will happen is the level will rise. So the corals, the sunlight cannot possibly reach the corals, and there can be a possible bleaching of corals. It can impact mangroves as well. If there is a higher level of salt water, it can possibly impact mangroves. It can possibly impact other marine animals and fisheries. So I have created my structure of environment, biodiversity, humans. Within humans, I have some points. These points I can modify according to the answer, write an argument, give an example, whatever I know. So you can see I can write my answer within time with arguments with good value addition. Then I will move to second part, impact on other countries in the Indian Ocean region. Now, in such kind of questions, one thing I personally have faced, and I've seen other students also face a difficulty, is you must have utilized most of your points in the first part itself. So now you don't know what to write in this, because the answer should be very similar, the impact on India. and impact on other countries. How can we generate new points here? So you have to think why this question is being asked. Other countries. What are the other countries in the Indian Ocean region? There are Bangladesh, there is Maldives, there is Sri Lanka. Now, many of these countries are very low-lying countries, small island developing countries. So you have to think from those countries' perspective. What can happen to those countries? India is a different country, right? So, for example, Bangladesh is a very low-lying country. So, coastal erosion, coastal inundation can impact it a lot. There can be coastal inundation again. There are very small island states. So, what can be possible impact? They have small economies. It can very severely impact them, and so on and so forth, right? So this is a different kind of impact for them, which you can write here. Their economies are dependent on rice, farming, shrimp cultivation, tourism. That can be very severely impacted, and it can create poverty, debt crisis, and so on. In environment questions, again, I'm repeating this. It is very important to relate it to the impact on humans. You cannot just stick to environment, but relate it to impact on humans as well. Okay. Now, the last thing, coming over to conclusion. Now, in this question, and even in the oil pollution question as well, we are talking about a challenge. In most of the environment question, we kind of tend to talk about a challenge. If there is a challenge related to water, wetland, anything, sea level, disaster, anything, there is a challenge in front of us. So do not leave your question just addressing that. Try to introduce a way forward in your answer. If you have good space, then make a heading way forward and write some points there. What can be the going forward way forward? If you do not have space, write a good 3-4 lines conclusion with way forward in it. Okay, it is important. Do not end with the challenge, end on a solution. Let's move on to the next question. Okay. The question is, one water approach is the key to combat water and urban ecological challenges discussed. Now, in this question, you do not even have to think about introduction, because in the question itself they've introduced a very important keyword, one water. If there is a question which has some keyword, very uh, different kind of word which is not generally used, just define it. It's very important to define that word in the introduction. Okay, so we will define what is one water approach. No part of water is considered wasted and everything is utilized in a cycle. Now the question is, key to combat water and urban ecological challenges. Again, identify the parts of the question. There are two parts: combat water challenges, combat urban ecological challenges. Now you have to discuss this. So what will be your heading? First heading will be one water approach, key to combat water challenges. Now in your points, you will write how one water approach is combating water challenges, right? So what is one water approach? We are utilizing water kind of in a cycle. No water is being wasted. So what is a water challenge? First of all, we'll identify कि water challenges है क्या. So water challenges, there is water scarcity. So if you are recycling water, we are using gray water, if we are recycling this water, then our water scarcity challenge is solved. Another challenge related to water is pollution. If you are cleaning your water properly, if your treatment done to water is proper, then pollution problem is solved. Another problem, and so on and so forth, right? Next part is urban ecological challenges. Again, think about any urban ecological challenges related to water. There is flooding, there is urban flooding. So for urban flooding, one water also includes blue and green infrastructure. So this kind of infrastructure will help to prevent flooding. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? How am I generating points in this? Now in this question, a keyword is water. And if you have gone through PYQs, you will see that water is a very repeated theme in GS1 and GS3. So it is utmost necessary for you that you have good notes on water. You must have, if you are writing on water, you should have good examples, you should have good data, you should have good solutions in this, because this is a question which is very much expected. It is not a new question. So you have to do very good in these kind of questions. If there is a certain new question, then it is okay if you write an average answer. But if there is a question like this, related to water or related to flooding, something which gets repeated, you must write a very good answer. Now, how can you prepare notes on this? Just think about basic things related to water. So what are the different sources of water? What are the different issues related to water? What are the different impacts related to these issues of water? what can be different solutions. Just under these headings, make all of your points. Very easily you can find material on this. Very easily you can find good case studies, good examples and everything. Okay. So we'll move to next question. Okay. Ensuring healthy wetlands is critical for climate mitigation and adaptation, as well as sustaining biodiversity and human health. Discuss. What are the mechanisms that exist in India to achieve this? Again, first thing, identify the parts of the question. Now, before discuss, there is one line, but in this line itself, the examiner has given multiple parts. Healthy wetlands, critical for climate mitigation and adaptation. This is one part. Sustaining biodiversity. This is second part. And human health. This is third part. So in first part itself, you have to address all three of them. You cannot just go on writing whatever you know about wetlands. You have to address in context of these three things. All right. So now for climate and I'll give you an example in this climate mitigation and adaptation. How wetlands are critical for mitigation and adaptation. For example, climate, these wetlands, these are peatlands at places and they have a lot of carbon capture mechanism. So they prevent releasing of carbon into the atmosphere. This way they lead to mitigation mechanism. In adaptation ways, they prevent flooding because they slowly absorb the water and release during water scarce times. So they prevent both flooding and drought and act as natural absorbers of water. So these kind of points you can write in climate mitigation and adaptation. Again, this is a very often repeated theme, wetlands related to water. Very, very important that you have good points in this, good examples, good case studies. Now, if you do not remember examples, always use your prelims knowledge. You must have done Ramsar mapping in your prelims. So you remember that if there are many sites, many Ramsar sites, you must remember at least 5, 6 of them. At that point of time, when you're writing this answer, apne aap, you will get 5, 6 in your mind, even if you do not remember all sites. It's not even necessary. Use those sites as examples in this question, right? Wherever it is possible. For example, in sustaining biodiversity, I can write the example of Chilika Lake. It is a very good example, right? And similarly for human health also, you will write here points. Now there is a second question. What are the mechanisms that exist in India to achieve this? Now this is a very specific question. You either know this or you do not know this. So what to do in these questions? Again, use your preliminary knowledge. You might not be able to write the best answer if you do not. If you know, then this question is done. But if you do not know what to do, remember your prelims knowledge. We study wetland convention, wetland program, something, these kind of words will hit your mind. Try to remember what kind of schemes you studied, what were the programs. You must remember Ramsar, everyone remembers. Just write that. Whatever you remember, just write in these questions. If you do not remember the very specifics, just keep adding value using examples. And if there is still space remaining, you can, since it asks those mechanisms that already exist, you can write mechanisms further required or steps further required if you have space remaining. Okay. We'll see this question. Discuss in detail the photochemical smog, emphasizing its formation, effects, and mitigation. Explain the 1999 Gothenburg Protocol. Now, this question might seem like a bouncer if you do not know photochemical smog, if you do not know. So, it is a little bit factual and a specific question. So, for these kind of questions, I would say whenever you are studying for your prelims examination, keep in mind that even in mains, you can get very specific question. So if you had studied well for prelims, you would have been able to answer this question. Okay. So we know what is photochemical smog. Just uh, in the introduction, you can define what is photochemical smog. Very simple because there is a keyword here. Now there are three parts again given in the question itself: formation, effects, mitigation. You have to address each part very clearly. Now, in the formation, we know that there are nitrogen oxides which react with volatile organic compounds in the presence of sunlight to create ground level ozone and so on and so forth. You have to write this formation. You can even create a cycle kind of thing or just write words plus and a reaction, something which makes it a little bit more presentable. Then effects, what are the effects of photochemical smog? Then when there is smoke, there is no visibility. Then the impact on health, impact on biodiversity, impact on nearby trees, impact on vulnerable section. See, again, I'm using the same structure and generating points and mitigation. You can talk about mitigation. You can write about mitigation from the cause itself. We know it happens due to volatile organic compounds and due to nitrogen oxides. Now I have to see from where these two gases are released. If I stop the release of these gases, if I am able to control their release, then that is mitigation. Now nitrogen oxides are released in vehicular pollution. So write the points how to control vehicular pollution. Volatile organic compound sources also we are studied in our prelims. Write how to control those sources. So that talks about mitigation. Okay, ensuring healthy wetlands is critical. Okay, so now in the introduction aspect, what you can do is you can define what are wetlands,
Okay.
or you can talk about what is currently happening to wetlands. There is there is if there what are the
Ma'am,
critical challenges.
any data, any current data related to
If
that?
you know data, that is good. I often I do not prefer a lot of data because I personally did not remember a lot of data. What
Okay.
I preferred was for the often repeated themes, I will prepare some data and I will revise it. If I have too much of a data, I will remember nothing. If I have some data very optimally, I will remember that and I will be able to utilize it in exam. The point is not to remember everything or not to remember every data associated with every concept. Just remember some data which you can use at multiple places. So, for example, the sea level rise. In that question, the data was given in the question itself, but that was a very good data, right? You can utilize it at multiple places. You can utilize that value addition in a climate change question. If there is some uh, marine ecosystem related question, you can utilize that data there itself. So,
Okay.
learn that kind of data, because if you'll keep learning very specific data, no, you will have a lot of, and you will not remember anything by the end of exam. Okay. So we were talking about what can we write. You can define. If you remember data good enough, you can write that. You can write critical challenges associated with wetlands, maybe, or some examples, some very good examples, some recent thing related to wetlands. Okay. So this way you
Okay.
can write, but just add some value there. Bas.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, if multiple question is asked in a same question, what we have to prefer to introduce them separately or jointly in one paragraph?
Okay. So if there are multiple parts of a question, so now that depends on the question. Okay. Uh, just remember how much space is there, and you have to utilize that space very carefully. Now, for each part, if I'll go on introducing, I'll waste 2, 3 lines here, 2, 3 lines again, 2, 3 lines again. More than half of my page is wasted in introduction. I have not even reached the body. So what I used to do was I used to write single introduction of 2, 3 lines, because there is one common theme which connects all of these parts, right? For example, if there was oil pollution question, oil pollution was connecting all the parts. Impact on India, impact on other countries. The common thing in all of them was oil pollution. If there is one water approach, it is a key to challenging water problems, urban ecological problems. One common theme across all of them is one water approach, right? So that common theme you introduce, and after that, I don't think you need to introduce it again. Just write the subheading and points under it. Those points and that subheading is important. You don't need to introduce it again and again. And a final conclusion.
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Ma'am, sometimes there are on-the-spot questions for which we do not have our notes prepared.
Hmm.
Especially, I face this dilemma in ethics, for which the questions are very you-oriented. What is your experience? How you will tackle such situations in your personal life? So, can you please answer that? How to answer the questions for which there are no notes available? But generally, answer questions your personal experience and your day-to-day life situations.
Okay, okay. So there are two things which you're asking in this question. The first thing is about the bouncer questions, which we do not know, which we might not know, which for which we do
Yes.
not have our notes or anything. The second part about is about the personal questions related to ethics. These two questions are different things. Okay. For the first part, if you do not know a question, है ना, uh, there will be always something you will know about a question if you have done your means preparation well enough. If you have gone through PYQs, gone through syllabus, you will know something. If there is very specific, for example, that Gothenburg protocol question, that is a different thing. But in general, if there is a 10 marker, 15 marker, you will know something. Or you can understand something about the question, right? For example, if there is oil pollution, I can create a definition even if I don't know any definition. I know what is pollution, right? What is pollution? If there is a normal, pure, pristine environment ecology, something unwanted comes into it and damages it. That is pollution, right? Vaguely, I have some idea in my mind. Now I'll relate oil into it. So if there is a bouncer question, do not stray away from the demand. Do not write whatever you know, but remaining within the demand of the question, try to mold whatever you know according to the question. First thing. Second most important thing in these kind of questions is not to panic. Because when these questions come, I've seen people panic
Yeah.
and they
Yes,
think I
ma'am.
do not know anything in this question, so they move on to the other question. Okay, you can do these questions in the end, you can move on to the questions you know. But whenever you are writing this question, do not panic. Believe me, if you have done your preparation well, you will know something. It will very rarely happen that for an entire 15 marker, entire 10 marker, you know nothing, zero. You will know something. Something will click in your mind somewhere, something you must have studied, and you will be able to write something around it. Just remain very calm. Just try this once, okay? Do not panic. Do not think about how much time you have. Do not think, forget about everything. Just focus on that question and think, what can you possibly write? You will be able to come up with an answer. Now, the second part of your question was about the ethics thing. Now, ethics is a very different paper in itself. I don't think we can mix ethics here. So whenever we are talking ethics separately, we will talk about it there. But one thing I can tell you, I think you're talking more about case studies. What is your experience? How will you
Yes,
solve
ma'am.
it? There is a proper
Yeah.
method to solve case studies. है ना? We do not try directly based on our personal experience until and unless that is the demand of the question.
Yes.
But there is a different method to solve case studies. We have to discuss that very separately, and that is a long discussion in itself. We will discuss it some other time. Okay?
Sure, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. No worries.
Okay, if anyone else is having any other doubt, you can ask.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we will wrap up the session in next 10 minutes.
हाँ
मुझे सामने तो नहीं हिंदा
हम्म।
सारी करनी
Okay, I see a question in the chat. Some teachers says that do not skip any question, answer all. Okay, so what is your question? Should we do that? Should we not do that? I'll take that is your question. Okay, so there are different multiple opinions on this, and there is no one settled opinion. Now, what you can do is, obviously, you will answer the questions you know. For the questions you do not know, again, the same technique. Try to remember around the demand of the question, whatever you know, whatever you remember. If it is a question which is completely very specific and you do not know anything at all, matlab, not even you cannot even relate to the context of the question. Matlab, it is completely zero. Despite remaining in your calm state, everything is zero there. It is not due to your panic. Then you can possibly think of leaving a question, which very rarely happens, which I have seen. If you're well prepared, it will very rarely happen. But if it happens in that extreme situation, you can think of leaving. Otherwise, you will be able to write some answer around the context. Maybe not for full 2 or 3 pages, but at least for 1 page, 1.5 page, you might be able to write something.